Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Sure you've heard. Sure the news covered it extensively. I'm sure the mainstream corporate-controlled right-wing media got all over the fact that our Environmental Protection Agency proposed a new rule. Gonna get rid of lead pipes. Evidently, we've got about 9 million lead pipes still floating around. And look, understand, we know lead's not good for us. We know it. But here's the other part of this. We know that the lead pipes are probably in poverty-ridden areas, so most people don't really care, which is why you probably didn't get to see it on the corporate-controlled mainstream right-wing media. Probably didn't get to see that at all. But, I read this report, and I'm like, hey, this is a great idea because, one, we're going to get rid of lead pipes. And been talking about lead my entire life. So the fact that they're proposing in the next 10 years to replace all of them sounds like a great idea. We might save a generation of kids from lower IQ scores and all of the other things that happen. But yeah, don't get too excited because our Supreme Court... they're about ready to destroy regulatory oversight. So maybe these kind of proposed rules, that can never come into effect. Because what does the EPA know about water? Of course, we've got 6 right-wing judges. They know everything. So I had to throw that out there because, look, the sad reality is this administration is doing some really great stuff, and we're not hearing an awful lot about it. Not at all. Now, I wanted to start today with an email that I got from William. And look, I've been getting a lot more email now that we're winding down the live radio program. But William sent me this email. And it's one of these things that, look, I'll tell you, it's right in my wheelhouse. So thank you, William. But he says, quote, we need a generational understanding that greed is not good. I think I've said that. He quotes Ben Franklin. The poor, he said, have little, beggars have none, the rich too much, enough, not one. And that's one of the, I think, Poor Richard's Almanac, one of the things in there. I don't know if Ben actually believed what he was saying, but it makes sense. And he asked the question, what happened to the wisdom of Ben Franklin and past generations? He says, we were once a nation with one of the most balanced economies in the world, but that was generations ago. He said, we have greedy corporations gouging us blind and political leaders who are corrupt. How did we get here and who is responsible is a question that must be answered. How did we go from a nation with broad shared prosperity to one with haves and have-nots? Republicans have brought us tax reform and Democrats brought us bad trade deals. Who is fighting for the little guy? The working guys and gals like us. He says rampant greed by the wealthy, corporations, and a Republican Party ruled by a tax-cheating grifter. That's a start. How are we to fight back, he asks. The deck is stacked, and we, the little people, are being crushed, and it feels like no one cares. Now, here's the thing. I read through all of that, and the part that grabbed me is the no one cares. The fact that a lot of working people believe that no one cares, that their struggles, that their sacrifices, that their hard times, that nobody cares. And you can blame that on a political class that's worried about continually funding their next election. You can blame that on a news media that, if it bleeds, it leads. If it's divisive and feeds the outrage, then clearly something we have to talk about. We don't talk about policy anymore. We don't talk about the things that maybe, I don't know, might make our lives better. And this, William, is where we founded this show on this idea The idea that working people would have a voice, a place to share thoughts, ideas, to want to talk about the things that will make lives better. So if you believe no one cares, understand that I care, and that there are millions of people out there who do care. And that if we come back somewhere closer to the same, put aside all the crazy stuff that we're force-fed daily. We have to figure out how to solve real problems. We have to figure out how we make sure that we have an economy that works for all of us. Because, as I've said before, the reality is we're heading towards very significant changes in our economy. And the question that keeps coming back up for me is, what good is an economy if it doesn't support the working people, if it doesn't give you opportunities to move ahead, if it doesn't reward hard work, if it doesn't, I hate using the adage, but it's what I grew up believing, that if you worked hard, played by the rules, that you actually got ahead. So when I hear people say no one cares, and I heard this a lot when we did our Working Class Heroes tour, it makes me go, well, maybe we should be getting more involved. Maybe we should be demanding more of the things that will make our lives better and ignoring most of the things that rip us apart. I say all the time, we should be fighting for things that make life better and stop fighting over nonsense. Because fighting over nonsense has got us right where we are. And William's right. You've got a Republican Party that has deregulated, that has destroyed, that has detaxed, that has gone and privatized, profitized, and, well, screwed over communities and the little guy. And Democrats, sadly, they haven't been the party of working people until late. And this is where I go back to, I like Joe Biden. I like what Joe is doing. I like the policies that are coming out. The idea that workers should be able to organize, an active NLRB, an active Department of Labor. Julie Su, the Secretary of Labor, just held a meeting, a conference with business leaders and labor leaders and workers, and brought people together to talk about, how do we make this whole thing work for everyone? We had a Department of Labor for a while that only listened to business interests and was extraordinarily hostile to labor. So for me, William, we have to find the people who do care. And that's what elections are about. It's not about, who won the popularity contest. It's not even about who wears what hat. I want there to be pro-worker Republicans. There just aren't. The sad reality is, and I keep coming back to this, Republicans hate working people. Look at what they do. Look at the tax policies that they've rammed down our throats for generations now. Starting with Reagan, going through H.W. Bush, coming through Trump. I mean, we have redistributed the wealth of this country so far upward that most working people, and this is what I talked about this the other day with Virginia Fox saying, no one wants to work, at a hearing where they're talking about excessive overtime, where people are working more than 40 hours. But she's sticking to that line because the people who are benefiting from this system want us to be at each other's throats. And I don't know where this election is going to take us. I have great fears. I have great fears that Trump is elected and all of the progress that we've made as a working class will be eviscerated. Which is why you have billionaires supporting him. Because they don't want active, engaged citizens. They don't want empowered workers. They don't want people who are going to demand their worth. They want people who know their place. They want people who are going to be just happy to have a job. I'm okay. They want people who are going to be, we don't want to rock the boat. Instead of saying, you know what? We should all have health care. We should all have retirement security. We should all earn a wage that supports a family and ourselves. And not just bread, but roses too. Not just bare existence, but some of the things that make life better. We've seen this movie before. We've been here before. We just have to learn the lessons of the past and move forward together. That's the answer. So, William, if you believe no one cares, I care. And that's a start. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Got lots to get to, lots to talk about. Back after this.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So some not so great news, to be honest. The National Mediation Board, they denied the request of the Association of Professional Flight Attendants. You may remember we had their communications guy, Paul Horshorn, on not too long ago, talking about wanting to enter into a 30-day cooling off period to give the ability of American Airlines flight attendants and workers to potentially strike down the road, because they have been negotiating a contract for 5 years. They have not had a raise in 5 years, and yet, because of the Railway Act, Labor Act, under which they are ruled, they don't get to strike. They don't get to just go out. They have to go through a whole long, drawn-out process. 5 years. So we'll see with this. Then maybe we'll get Paul back on the program to share some thoughts. Let's go to the phones. We got Steve in Chicago on line one. Steve, how are you today?
Fine, thank you. Sorry, just getting in the car. So I want to make a couple of points. And I think you're absolutely right. Moving forward, what we want is a system that enfranchises as many people as possible. And the question that we have to ask ourselves is, what do we do in terms of technological advancement that doesn't only benefit a few people? Many economists believe that the first trillionaire is already alive, and it's just a question of when someone will be able to develop that industry that brings together software and hardware, so that we actually start living in something akin to what we used to watch when we were kids, in terms of the Jetsons.
Yep.
So that we don't have to do a lot of the drudgery. The guy who wakes up at 4 o'clock in the morning in Chicago in January to come out and pick up all of the garbage outside of my home, there's nothing, that's socially redeeming about that. Perhaps he has some degree of satisfaction that he works hard, but it's no loss to society if a machine does that job rather than a human being, and that human being can do something more productive with their lives. If they want to write poetry or philosophy, if they want to study art, if they want to get involved in their community, all of those things. But what has to happen is, when technology allows us to move forward, we can't have a few people who then benefit from it. So, okay, yes, there's this great thing, and all of you can benefit from it, but there's going to be a service fee, just like you pay for everything else. And you have to subscribe to it, and then over the years, we're just going to increase it as you get used to it.
Yep.
In terms of what you're going to end up paying. So making a few people tremendously wealthy, well, the rest of us have to work in some other capacity to pay for the things that we think are now necessary because we've gotten used to them. And that's the big question. Again, what are we going to do in that regard? as we move forward relative to technology. Technology is a great thing, but somehow I think people believe that it's their savior, that somehow technology is going to alleviate the need for work. It can in a certain kind of structured society, but in a different kind of structure, as we've already seen. We've had huge gains in terms of technology in the last 40 years. But has that improved fundamentally the quality of life of people? No. In 1969, the middle class was a lot better off than they are today, despite the internet, despite all of the advantages that you have in all sorts of realms. So it's about who benefits and who controls these things. And again, that's a function of public policy. If you don't control the people who are the ownership class, they will exploit people for everything that they can. And I firmly agree with some of the analysis out there that some of this is a sickness, that the idea of I've got 50, 100 billion, 200 billion, I need more. I mean, what in heaven's name do you need more than that for? I mean, why would you need that kind of money?
Well, what's that movie, Moneyball? It's not about the money, it's what the money says.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, like you quoted, in terms of, greed is good. Yeah, that's an example. It comes from Wall Street, 1980s film, in which everybody who watched that, virtually everybody, a generation of young men, walked away from that thinking rather than the lesson that Oliver Stone was trying to teach, which is that greed is not good and Gordon Gekko is a terrible human being. No, instead, in the following 5 years, record numbers of young men decided they wanted to go and be stockbrokers and work on Wall Street, not because they hated Gordon Gekko, but because they wanted to be Gordon Gekko. I mean, talk about walking away from a movie with the wrong message. Well, that's the message. And they went on to quote that movie for the rest of their lives. Yeah. And that's the problem. Like America sells you on this idea that that you're going to be the Gordon Gekko. So a lot and as a result of which you have a lot of average people who out there, who will vote for what the billionaire class wants in terms of things like tax cuts. Why? Because they swear to God that within the next 10, 15 years, they're going to be part of that class.
It's going to be them.
They really believe it.
They're going to hit the big one. It's going to happen. You're spot on, Steve. I appreciate the thoughts, man. Good stuff as always. And look, not just taking it from Gordon Gekko. I swear, every one of those books I read as a kid, like 1984, everyone took the wrong message. It wasn't a playbook of what to do. It was a cautionary tale of what not to do. Let's go to Kurt in Akron online too. Kurt, how are you today? And I'm glad I can hear you.
Oh, hi, Rick. Thank you for taking my call. How are you?
I'm good. What's on your mind, brother?
Well, I've call all week, but you were doing some really good topics this week. Anywhere from the American dream to home ownership and everything. And it got me thinking about, as far as the home ownership thing, it got me thinking about the place where I live here in Akron, which is a neighborhood called Firestone Park. And this is a neighborhood that was built in the 1920s, 100 years ago, where Harvey Firestone wanted his employees to live close enough to the factory that they could walk or take the trolley, and he built an entire neighborhood for his employees to live in.
Yeah, company town. There are lots of them around the country. What's the point?
Well, no, I'm sorry. Well, no, I was just going to say is, can you imagine an employee or an employer doing that nowadays? Building an entire neighborhood to keep their employees happy so that they show up to work, or think about something like that. I mean, the boss.
But here's the thing, Kurt. I don't think I want to romanticize the era of the Milton Hershey's, of the the company towns. I don't think I want to romanticize that, but I get your point that they did, on a certain level, meet the needs of their workforce, and they did try and make things a little bit more tolerable. I'll agree with you on that.
Right, for the families, those are people who, you're right, you shouldn't romanticize it, but these are people too who, like I said, built these neighborhoods, and then the families, the children learned to grow up together, and they became friends, and you actually had people, looking out for each other, caring for each other, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I would say that's more the operation of the individuals and the communities, and not our wealth class.
You're right. But you're right. But as far as the American dream goes, thank God for things like the GI Bill that gave my grandfather the chance to start his own heating and cooling company back in 1952, 6 years after he came home from World War II. He was a guy who, obviously, as a small businessman in the 50s and 60s, like anyone else, may have struggled a little bit because you were by yourself. But as time went on, he was established, and people started to go to him for their needs as far as what he was offering them. If he couldn't do a job, his competitors, he would, he would refer his competitors to someone who could do the job. He even co-signed loans for his competitors to get them started, to the point where people knew who he was. Even well into the 21st century, people knew who he was because he had that reputation as a great small businessman and a reputation for the kindness that he did, that, people would go to him even before he died. And, he's the only employer I know who not only gave people a wage, obviously, health insurance and 401ks, that sort of thing, but he's the only employer I know who waited until the end of the day to leave to go do his own thing because he wanted to shake every employee's hand to thank them for doing a job well done that day.
Yeah, that's a generation long gone. Long gone, my friend. But I appreciate you sharing that with me.
Nice but it's a nice way to remember what it used to be, and you kind of wish it could survive in this kind of business environment.
I'm right there with you.
All right, well, thank you, and hey, maybe I'll give you a call tomorrow for the last show.
There you go. Thanks, Kurt. Appreciate it. No, and look, Kurt's right. I mean, you think about that generation. I think of my uncle who passed just about a year and a half ago, who started a small business back in the early '60s, and it grew to be one of the biggest, electrical contractor businesses in the city. And he was kind of the same way. Went to all of the employees' weddings and funerals and birthdays, and sent cards and gifts for birthdays and graduations. He was the kind of guy you wanted to work for. And sadly, what's happened is he passed it on to his kids, and what they do, they sold out to a giant conglomerate. That's how things go. And I go back to it's the Gordon Gekko thing. It's the greed is good, hooray for me, and the heck with everyone else. And I think Kurt's right. How do we get back to a time where you would send work to your competitor if you couldn't do it, to ensure that people got what they needed, that sense of community. I don't know. I'm not sure that that'll ever come back, but I'm hopeful that we will come back together. Because look, I think back to the time that Kurt was talking about, building the robber barons, building company towns. There was camaraderie, there was solidarity in those towns. There was organizing that went on in those towns that made life not just tolerable, but nice, but livable. And I'm not going to give credit to the Fords and the Milton Hersheys and the Firestones, but to the people. And I think even in this moment, I think we can organize and make life better. Just my thought. So if as I said at the beginning, if William believes no one cares, maybe we can show it. Just my thoughts. Want to hear yours? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Lots to get to. Right back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1930. That was the day the world lost the miner's angel, Mother Jones. She had crossed the country many times over, been involved in practically every strike that built the labor movement, stood with miners and steelworkers, and milled children everywhere. Mother Jones had asked to be buried with the Verdun miners killed in the massacre of 1898 at Union Miners Cemetery in Mount Olive, Illinois. Dozens of labor leaders, including AFL President William Green, attended her funeral in Maryland, where she had been living. Then AFL representatives, several Illinois miners, and others boarded the Baltimore and Ohio train to accompany her body to Mount Olive. Historian David Featherling describes the scene as her body arrived. A band played Nearer My God to Thee as onlookers bowed their heads and wept. Survivors of the Verdun riot bore the casket to the Odd Fellows Hall, where it lay in state. The town of 3,500, with its strong and violent heritage, was thronged by thousands of coal diggers. At least 15,000 turned out for the funeral. Broadcast on WCFL, the Chicago Federation of Labor's radio station, the labor priest, Reverend John McGuire, gave the memorial address and officiated at the funeral in Mount Olive's Roman Catholic Church of the Ascension. He asked what weapons she had to fight the fight against oppression of working men. Only the great and burning conviction that oppression must end. Only an eloquent and flaming tongue that won men to her cause. Only a mother's heart torn by the suffering of the poor. Only a towering courage that made her carry on in the face of insuperable odds. Only a consuming love for the poor. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Growing up, I absorbed a lot of values from my old Texas daddy. A strong commitment to the common good, a healthy work ethic, and a lively sense of humor. But one thing about him I've rejected: his determination to have a perfect yard of thick, verdant St. Augustine grass. Lord, how he worked at it, laying sod, watering, fertilizing, watering, weeding, watering, spreading pesticides, watering, mowing, more watering. But it was too hot, too dry, too infested with blight, bugs, slugs, and such. He was up against Texas nature, and he just couldn't win. So I've gone in the opposite direction, slowly nurturing a natural yard of native trees, drought-tolerant plants, and a general live-with-nature ethic in my little landscape. I'm hardly alone in this rejection of the uniform green grass imperative. A spontaneous yard rebellion is taking hold across our country as more and more households, neighborhoods, businesses, etc. shift to a nature-friendly approach. A particularly encouraging push for change is coming from school kids, elementary level through college, who are appalled by the poisoning of our globe and organizing locally to do something that both makes a difference and makes a statement. One exemplary channel for their activism is a student movement called Rewild Your Campus. Of course, some people consider wild yards to be scruffy, ugly, unruly. That's their choice, but some also insist that tidy grass lawns must be everyone's choice. So they proclaim themselves to be the yard police, demanding that cities and homeowner associations make green grass uniformity the law. They file busybody lawsuits and run right-wing social media campaigns targeting people and groups that disobey. This is Jim Hightower saying, these attacks are silly because they are silly, and also because they're attacking the future. To work for yard sanity and choice, go to rewild.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So interestingly enough, you have former Speaker Kevin McCarthy going after Matt Gaetz, and why not? Because Matt Gaetz is a horrible person, but you got McCarthy saying that, he is a decidedly unserious member of Congress who belongs in jail. Pretty stern words, to which Matt Gaetz responded, tough words from a guy who sucker punches people in the back. The only assault I committed was against Kevin's fragile ego. And you go, how wonderful to see the people that we elect to do the people's business interacting so wonderfully. And while the children bicker and fight, there's real work that needs to be done. And sadly, all our news media feeds us a steady diet of outrage, candy, and division. How about we talk about getting something actual done? Getting some work for we the people done as we look down the double barrel of a massive structural shift in this country? How about an economy that functions for everybody? And here to share some thoughts on maybe how we get something done, and something that's near and dear to my heart, I've asked the good representative Mark Takano to come talk with you. Mark is a congressman for California's 39th congressional district. Congressman, thanks for taking time for us.
I'm really glad to be here, Rick.
So let me get your thoughts on this whole all this child's play going on. I got to ask you, this has got to be just ridiculous. I mean, people send you to Congress to do some work, get stuff done, bring home the bacon, whatever, and this is what we've gotten out of Republican leadership.
Yeah, no, they haven't showed that they can govern. There's a group of Republicans who aren't interested in governing. They're really extreme ideologues, and they care more about their extreme fantasies than about doing anything for everyday people. And so being right is more important than getting something done.
You know, I just answered an email from a listener who said, look, you know, things are tough. People are struggling. The economy is hard for working people. And he doesn't believe anybody's listening. He doesn't believe people care. And as I've said, look, no, I care. I care about, you know, making sure that we push policies that are going to make lives better, that we're fighting for things that make lives better instead of over things that divide us. You know, what would you say to somebody who goes, look, I have no hope in the system. You know, nobody's listening. Nobody's paying attention. Nobody cares, Mark.
Well, look, I can understand why that listener feels the way he does. But let me just say that there are some things I want him to pay attention to. In the last Congress, the 117th Congress, we passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which had some real cost savings for many, many Americans. Americans that depend on insulin. There's a heck of a lot of us that depend on insulin. You know, the Democrats capped it at $35. They've been able to reduce the cost of drugs by having Medicare negotiate directly with drug companies for about 10 drugs a year. Did it go as far as I wanted it to go? I personally, no. I wish to heck that we would have said Medicare can negotiate cost of every drug. Why do we have to limit it to 10? But they're selecting 10 of the most utilized drugs by the American people every year. An additional 10 come up. You know, there have been real efforts to try and rein in the cost of healthcare, but especially prescription drugs. That's one thing that eats up people's budgets. You know, I think the other way to look at it, I know I want to acknowledge the pain that people are suffering with inflation. Inflation comes after tremendous events like a pandemic. Remember, we lost 1 million people. That's about 400,000 people that we lost in World War II. And we suffered great inflation after World War II as people began normal demand, as the economy, the wartime economy shifted to a regular consumer economy. We saw inflation that followed a traumatic event like World War II. We had a traumatic event. 1 million people died. Supply chains were interrupted. So there's some adjustments going on. Look, there's also some problems with corporations taking advantage by raising the prices because there's not enough competition.
Yep.
They've consolidated too much. So we really need the right people in government to break up these monopolies and these cartels that exist.
No, I agree with you. Look, I've asked the question 1,000 times. Who's going to be this generation's Teddy Roosevelt? Who's going to be the trust buster? Who's going to be this generation's Harry Truman, going to go after the people who are, you know, war profiteering or pandemic gouging? Who are going to be those people? And are Democrats doing that?
Yes. Well, the answer is the Democrats are doing this, not as much as I want us to be doing it, but they are doing it. You know, the president's appointee to the FTC, you know, is doing as much as she can with executive authority to, you know, look at the ways to actually address the ways in which lack of competition is a problem out there. But more needs to be done. Congress is too closely divided. But I actually kind of see even some voices on the right who are also understanding that this consolidation, lack of competition, monopolies is not the word, but you know, too much consolidation where there's too few players and not enough competition is driving up prices. But look, the other way we can help the American people is to make sure that their wages and their salaries are able to grow. And we can do it in a couple of ways. There's 3 ways we can do this. One is to raise the minimum wage And whenever we get a minimum wage on the ballot in some state, it usually wins.
Correct.
Even in Florida, it was winning.
Correct.
The other way to do it is to increase, is to make sure that people have a right to overtime pay. And the way overtime pay works is that if you make less than a certain threshold, you have a right to earn overtime pay. It's called the overtime threshold. Unfortunately, that threshold for many decades was allowed to stay at a certain level.
$23,660.
Okay, thank you. You know that level. It needs to be raised so that more people are eligible for overtime pay. And to crack down on employers who give people manager titles who really aren't managers, because that's the way they can evade overtime pay, is they bop you on the head and say, you're a manager. And managers have to work overtime with no pay.
Right.
We'll make you in charge of a McDonald's, and you work 60 hours a week because you're the manager of McDonald's. You're really mopping the floors, flipping burgers, doing everything else that regular line workers are doing. You're doing some managerial work, but that's an unfair. So we need to, one, raise the threshold.
Right. But you
two,
do
crack down the classifications.
But Mark, you do get the cute little pin though.
You get the cute little pins as manager, but
you get
after a month, that becomes pretty meaningless, and people begin to figure it out. And you would rather be qualifying to earn overtime pay than that manager
Absolutely.
title.
Look, the reality is, and the third way is to encourage people to collectively bargain for better wages, hours, conditions. And I think the National Labor Relations Board has been doing a fabulous job. I love Jennifer Brazil. I think she's doing amazing work, and we need to be doing more of it. And you guys need to do some work getting the PRO Act passed.
I've been a champion of the PRO Act since its inception. I'm on the Education and Labor Committee. I call it educational labor. Republicans like to come in and they hate labor. They have a visceral hate for labor. They don't even want to have labor in the title of their committee.
Yep.
Listen, first time we've had a president of the United States go on a picket line when so much is at stake. And look, the UAW didn't get everything they wanted. Some of those folks on the picket line thought that they were going to get the 4-day work week, which I'm also a champion of. So you can also shorten the work week and say that people earn overtime pay at 32 hours rather than 40. I believe on balance that wouldn't shorten people's hours. It would make more people eligible for overtime pay that many people would elect to take.
Well, but since you brought this up, because, look, I've talked about this extensively. People are like, oh my gosh, how could you go to a 32-hour work week? And their heads are exploding. I go, can you imagine back in the 1880s when the 8-hour day movement started, 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what you will? That idea of having life balance and work balance. Can't you imagine how the employers' minds exploded when they were used to the sun up to sundown, 6 days a week work week?
They were used to a 19th century laissez-faire, like, let the market determine all of this. And people regularly worked 60 hours a week or more.
Yep.
It was not like you had a weekend. The weekend was legislated after a lot of social justice movements, and the industry that pioneered it was the auto industry. The auto industry so it's really interesting today to see the auto industry put the shorter work week, the 32-hour work week, on the table. I was happy to just see it get on the table. I just came back I took my father to Paris for the very first time. He'd never been. I sat with a young Paris city councilman, Paul Att. He's the youngest city councilman in Paris. And he told me, I learned that the sanitation workers in Paris, I think, work 32 hours or 33 hours. It's either 32 or 33.
Right.
And the problem in Paris is that they have a lot of strikes. But look, this is not within reach. Could they be better managed in Paris? Could there be someone that says you gotta you got to do 32 hours of work and get better services. Yeah, but the point is that stronger unions in other countries have meant that workers have more leverage and they get a better deal. And look, you mentioned before we got on the air about AI. I think, and you know, President Obama just a few weeks ago at the Democracy Forum of all of his alumni for his administration, he says, you know, we got to start talking about a shorter work week and things like universal basic income as a response to the disruption that AI is going to cause in many sectors of the economy. We've got to start talking about that. And so rather than having our heads explode or get freaked out that people's heads are exploding, the truth is we're facing some very serious and real disruptions by artificial intelligence. And we've got to think of some real adaptations and responses. And it can't be that hundreds of millions of people lose work or lose the ability to earn enough money, because who's going to buy all this stuff?
Exactly. No,
our
look,
economies make?
you know, look, Mark, you know, one of the things that I've said for a while is our representatives, folks like you in Congress, we're already behind the eight ball. This is something we should have been talking about a decade ago. We should be doing a whole bunch of things in a whole bunch of directions and quickly, because I want this to be, because look, we're not going to stop it. I'm not a Luddite. We're not going to destroy the machines. It's not going to happen. But I want this to be the first major transformational change in work in the history of civilization that doesn't destroy the working class and that workers don't take it on the chin. I want this to be an opportunity where people go, okay, yeah, my industry is going away. Look, I'm in the trucking industry. I know in a decade, maybe two, all trucks are probably going to be automated. I don't want to stop that, but I also want to make sure that the people who are going to get those jobs down the road have a way to support themselves and their families. And this is where I come to the reason I asked you to come on was, you know, look, you mentioned a 70-hour work week. My truck driver buddies and I, we've done those 70-hour work weeks without overtime pay, without pay most of the time when the wheels aren't moving. So the fact that you and Congressman Van Drew of New Jersey and Senator Ed Markey, who we've had on this program a couple of times, and Senator Padilla of California, have introduced this Guaranteeing Overtime for Truckers Act, to me is a huge, to steal a Bidenism, kind of a big freaking deal.
It is a big freaking deal. You know, the truckers were they were excluded from the protection of the original Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. So when President Roosevelt set minimum wages and set overtime pay and the work week in the Fair Labor Standards Act, they caved to the trucker lobby, not the truck drivers, but the people who own the trucking companies.
Yep.
And so what, you know, the feeling, drivers have been paid on interstate commerce. They've been paid according to how long they've driven, the distance they've driven, not the hours. And so they're cut out of the ability to own overtime pay. And so, as you said, truck drivers, wait around for the trucks to be loaded at whoever, you know, the shipper, whatever shipping operation that they're at. They could be waiting around for hours, and they're not getting paid for that. Look, I think it's fundamentally wrong. And look, the other thing is truckers have they can't drive over a certain amount of hours. You know, so they're also constrained by that. Truckers' time is valuable too. They shouldn't be treated any less than a sanitation worker who gets paid by the hour and who earns overtime after they work 40 hours. So what Representative Van Drew and Senators Markey and Padilla and I want to get done is to just simply end this exclusion of truck drivers from being protected by the overtime provisions of the 1938 Fair Labor Standards Act.
No,
it's been decades decades that they've had to suffer under this, it's time it ended.
No, absolutely. And I argue that this would make the road safer. When I tell people I'm a truck driver, everyone goes, "Oh my gosh," everyone, they're always aggressive, always, doing this stuff. And I go, that's because the wheels got to keep moving. And the faster those wheels move, the more money they make. You take that incentive away, that piecemeal incentive away, you're going to have safer drivers. You're going to have people who are, I think, going to be more conscious about their craft and not, I got a deadline I got to get to so I get this bonus or all of the stuff that comes out of it. So I think this is a good first step in helping the industry.
Yeah, and I think the other part of it is that we've got to structure somehow the cost of this movement so that the shipper and the receiver also bear the brunt of that cost of how long that driver is waiting around for it to be unloaded or to be loaded. I mean, there are other ways to exact more efficiencies out of what we currently have by making the receivers and the shippers more incentivized to be more efficient.
What do you say to the person, though, Congressman, that says, well, you're just going to hasten the move to AI, you're just going to hasten the automated vehicles, and they're going to want to get rid of drivers? What do you say to that argument?
Well, I wouldn't get too exercised about that for the trucking industry yet. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of infrastructure that has to be laid out to make driverless infrastructure, driverless commercial trucks viable. I'm seeing cities up and down California not really thrilled about driverless taxi.
You think?
It's not ready for prime time, and I don't know how fast prime time driverless truckers are going to trucks are going to be.
No, I keep saying all the time. I go, look, I can't get Netflix to not buffer, and I've got the best internet you can buy in my neighborhood. You want an 80,000-pound vehicle careening down the road on the inner tubes that can't play, a movie on my TV?
Yeah, well, look, what I do think will happen is that there may be a lot more automation and efficiencies being introduced at the shipping facility to shorten these wait times that the drivers have. I think there's a lot of things that it makes sense for the transportation folks, the transportation businesses to eke out more efficiencies than try to automate the driving.
No, you're spot on. No, that's probably the biggest point in all this. Make those drivers' time valuable and cost the shippers, and you'll see them getting people moved really quickly. And that driver shortage we're told exists would kind of go away. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. Here with Congressman Mark Takano. He's a representative from California's 39th Congressional District. Before I let you go, I got to ask you, you're the ranking member on the Veterans Affairs Committee. I know you got some legislation moving to try and help with veteran homelessness, which is very important, and help with getting the care that veterans need. Walk me through what's going on these important fronts. Because look, I think bipartisan. I think everybody wants to make sure that, or at least I hope, everyone wants to take care of our veterans. We have something called
the Home Act, which I'm grateful for the Republican majority for bringing down on Monday to the floor. But it should have been brought to the floor several months ago. What it would do is basically increase the per diem compensation to the local nonprofits that get veterans off the street and into motels and hotels for temporary housing. We actually brought down the rate of homelessness during the pandemic, believe it or not. Biden was able to do this because we had emergency adjustments to those rates. And those rates went away once the health emergency went away. And I said, look, we were having such great success at getting veterans into housing, temporary housing, get them off the streets. Why don't we just continue this? Because it's not a huge part of it's in the millions, not in the billions. Republicans did not want to continue it forever. They said, well, we'll do it for 18 months. Well, we had an 18-month agreement like 6 months ago. And as you know, we had like this latest debacle with a speaker election that lasted for nearly a whole month. we lost floor time. So look, I want to get this bill done by Christmas. That's my thing. I would like to get it done by Christmas. I think the American people are get really upset about homeless veterans, especially in these winter months. And if they knew that Congress has the bill, has the agreement among the House and Senate leaders, I think they'd be angry to see that there's any political games being played with the Home Act, is what it's called, the Home Act. The Home Act is going to be on the floor on Monday. The question is whether they're going to bring down the agreed upon language or a bill that has intentional flaws in it so that more political games can be played so they can extract something more. My message to my Republican colleagues is, come on, if we didn't have a speaker debacle for the last for a whole month, maybe we had time to play these games. But you've been bringing down hordes of amendments that don't pass because your own members don't even pass them. You have time to play those games, but you don't have. But you want to play even more games with this veteran homelessness bill called the Home Act. Don't do it. Yeah. Don't do it. We don't have the time. Get this done so that we can get the homelessness providers for our veterans the ability to start planning to get the programs in place. And the other thing, Elizabeth Dole has this amazing bill to help with long-term care for our veterans. She's built an amazing bipartisan network. Everybody loves Elizabeth Dole and her work with caregivers, and I love her. I would love to see Bob Dole. He died just a few days after Monday next week. I'd love to see on the anniversary of his death the Elizabeth Dole Act pass Congress in a form that can just pass the Senate.
Right.
We have a thing called the hotline in the Senate. So once bills that are non-controversial that are in perfect form go to the Senate, it goes on something called the hotline. And if no senators object, it will pass. I want the House Republican leadership to allow hotline-ready bills, the Home Act and the Elizabeth Dole long-term care bill, to come to the floor. We've already come to an agreement on, but don't play any games. Don't put down any flawed language that the Senate has to fix, and then we gotta spend many more weeks on this. Let's get this done by Christmas. Let's get a Christmas present for our veterans.
There you go. Look, you're much more charitable to the other side than I would be. We don't have time for those games. We don't have time because there are people who are struggling. There are veterans who are homeless, and there are people who aren't getting what they need. We've got hungry children thanks to this stuff. I'm not as charitable as you, but we do need to get work done. Representative Takano, I appreciate you taking time for us. Keep up the great fight, and I hope you come back and talk to us again.
Oh, I love this. Thank you for. I'm surprised I haven't been on your show before. I'm so glad to have the opportunity.
Well, you're welcome back anytime. I appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you,
Congressman Mark Takano. I want to hear your thoughts. Am I being a little mean by saying he's a little charitable? Maybe I am. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So really this story highlights the vulnerability of the global south in a scenario of global warming.
Unprecedented heat waves set all-time high national temperature records in Brazil and South Africa. Commercial jet crosses the Atlantic powered by waste, fat, and sugar, not fossil fuels. Plus,
as I've said for a long time, when I think climate, and I mean this sincerely, I think jobs.
President Biden touts booming clean energy economy in MAGA Republicans' district.
Boberts?
Yep.
Did he go to the theater with her?
No.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
They do want to take away the gas stoves, and in fact, they are taking away the gas stoves.
Why do they want to ban gas stoves?
Because they hate us. They hate humans. They hate joyfulness. They hate pies. They hate good food. They want us all to be miserable. They want us to suffer because they're all miserable. They want all of America to be as miserable and unhappy and unloved as they are. And we're just not going to go along with it.
They're not taking away the gas stoves. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, Fox News just can't give it up, can they?
No, they can't.
Oh, they're taking away your gas stoves, your refrigerators, your washers, your dryers, everything you love about life. Anyway, what do you have for us that's rooted in reality, Desi Doyen?
Well, first, last week, Brazil set a new all-time high national temperature record during a deadly record-shattering heat wave. And it's not even summer yet. The weeks-long extreme heat wave, the fourth to broil the country this year, has withered crops and triggered extreme storms, floods, power outages in major cities, and thousands of wildfires in critical species habitats. The heat was also linked to the death of a fan at a Taylor Swift concert. And South Africa also set a new all-time high national temperature record during the same stretch.
This is not good.
Nope. Also not good in international politics. Far-right climate science deniers have won elections in Argentina and the Netherlands. Argentina's new president, Javier Milei, has called climate change a socialist lie and said companies should be allowed to pollute rivers as much as they want to. In the Netherlands, the extreme far-right party of Geert Wilders won a parliamentary majority, promising to expand oil and gas extraction and pull back on climate and clean energy policies.
Can't we just give these guys jobs on Fox News instead? Why do they have to break everything?
Here in the U.S., a new study calculates that fine particle air pollution from coal-fired power plants was much more deadly than previously thought. Based on updated scientific data, the researchers estimate that since 1999, U.S. coal plant air pollution contributed to nearly 500,000 premature deaths, twice the number previously thought. Coal-related deaths have decreased dramatically as the nation has moved away from coal electricity.
Well, that's a good thing.
In aviation, a 787 jet has become the first commercial airliner to cross the Atlantic Ocean without using any fossil fuels, relying on a fuel blend made primarily from waste fats. Biofuels have substantially lower emissions than conventional jet fuel, but their use is limited by supply constraints and high costs. Some environmental groups called the one-time test flight a good first step in tackling aviation emissions, while the industry develops new technologies like electric batteries, liquid hydrogen, and other fuels to reach zero carbon emissions.
Good.
The Department of Energy released another $300 million in funding from the infrastructure law to boost clean energy manufacturing in former coal towns in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and elsewhere.
Definitely good.
President Biden authorized the use of the Defense Production Act to expand domestic manufacturing of super-efficient all-electric heat pumps for heating and cooling that are more efficient than traditional heating and air conditioning systems. And finally, the president was in Pueblo, Colorado this week to visit CS Wind, the largest wind turbine manufacturing facility in the world. CS Wind is investing $200 million to expand its factory and hire hundreds more workers thanks to incentives in the Democrats' climate and jobs law, the Inflation Reduction Act. Biden pointed out that the factory expansion directly benefits the district of far-right Republican House member Lauren Boebert, who voted against the IRA and has called it, quote, a massive failure.
All across America, instead of exporting jobs, companies, both foreign and domestic, are creating jobs here in America. Jobs. That's what climate's about. Not only saving lives and saving the environment, but jobs.
Well, no wonder they're furious about it over on Fox News. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I go back to the email that I started the program with, William saying that nobody's paying attention, no one cares, no one's listening to the struggles of average, everyday working people. And look, I think he truly puts blame where it belongs on the bad policies that have come out of conservative ideology, the tax cuts, the deregulation, the bad trade deals, all of this stuff that have harmed workers so greatly. But I'm telling you, there are people out there who are trying, people who do care. And one of those folks is my next guest. He's in my state, my Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, in the southwestern part. We'll forgive him for that. But he's in Mount Pleasant, Pennsylvania, on part of the Great Economy Tour that they're doing and talking with people in the southwestern part of the state. That's why I've asked Morris Pearl, he's the chairman of the Patriotic Millionaires, to come share some thoughts. Morris, thanks for taking time for us.
Great to be in your show, Rick. Thank you.
So how are things in the beautiful southwest of our Commonwealth?
Well, got some people who are not happy here. They're not happy with everything from NAFTA to the fact that people like me don't pay any taxes the way they do. I went, got about 40 people in a room, got a catered dinner in the back room of the Mount Pleasant Volunteer Firefighters Club, and gave them dinner and talked to them about taxes for an hour or so, and told them why it is that our tax system is organized, frankly, by both Democrats and Republicans over the years, with the idea you have to appease the rich. They think that, oh, the rich people will go on strike. I don't know what they think will go on strike from, but, oh, we have to appease the rich people. We can't charge them taxes. Oh, investment income, we can't tax that. We can only tax income from labor, from people working. And that's not the way it has to be. That's the way it is, but that's not the way it has to be. And that's what we told the people, that they can change it if they get their elected representatives to want to change it, or if they get different elected representatives who will want to change it, because it can be different.
And what kind of response did you get?
Frankly, everybody in the room was on our side and said yes. And I was told to expect, a lot of conservatives, a lot of Trump voters, a lot of people who would argue with me. Nobody argued. One person came up with it, one person who owned the hotel where some of our people were staying, and said, well, but if I sell my place, I get more than $500,000 in profit, I'll have to pay part of that profit to taxes. And I don't like paying taxes. And I told her, if she's making over $500,000 profit on selling her place, yeah, she can pay some taxes. But frankly, all those people agreed with us.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk to people common sense, maybe they buy it, which is why we haven't had these conversations very often.
We need to. We need to go explain these things to people. It wasn't like written by God on stone tablets that you have to be poor so other people can be rich.
I don't know. I think Ronald Reagan said it. I think you got to give the rich people all the money and it'll trickle down.
Yeah, and I try to explain to people how actually it trickles up to people like me when they make their mortgage payment or their rent payment or their iPhone payment or their electric bill payment. That money, little bits of it trickles up to those companies and to their shareholders. And people that own stock in Apple and Verizon get rich that way. And that's how I make money.
Yeah, but you've picked an issue that should be, when you're talking to working people, nonpartisan. It should be one of those things where you go, well, of course, the people who have all the money should be paying some more of the taxes. Of course, we need to have some kind of policies to ensure that we get the things that we need: healthcare, education, infrastructure, a military. We can go down the list of all the things that we need. It's just a matter of how you get the resources to pay for it. And when you have a system that's based on, well, the winners are walking away with all of the wealth, that's a problem.
It should be nonpartisan, and partially it is nonpartisan in that we can blame people from all different parties for this problem we're in.
No, I agree.
No party's been perfect.
No, we were sold the idea that if we give the rich people all the money, people like you, that you're smart. And I don't question that you're not smart, but that you'll use the money in the best interests of all of us. And that's the part where I disagree, because I think you're going to use the resources in the best interests of you.
Well, yeah. And I have I buy stock. I invest in the stock market, and hopefully the stocks will do well, and I'll have money for my retirement. And how that's going to do you any good is an open question. I mean, and sure, I could give away some of my money. I do give away some of my money, but it's not like it somehow trickles down to everybody else. I maybe give larger tips than most people do at restaurants by a little. But I think we need something more organized than that. I think we need actual policies of the government to help people, and not just depend on me sort of once in a while giving a big tip to an Uber driver or something and letting money trickle down that way.
But here's the thing, and this is where it comes back to, this is all structural. The fact of the matter is the wealthy know how to lobby and get what they want. They know how to use our political system to assure that they don't get held accountable. And understand, there's a court case right now, and I know you know this as well as anyone, this Moore case that's in front of the Supreme Court that could preemptively kill any idea of a wealth tax. And as you know, Elizabeth Warren, in her 2020, she campaigned on the idea of a wealth tax. We don't have one. But this case could preemptively kill any talk of potentially down the road any kind of wealth tax whatsoever.
Yeah, I hope it doesn't. We've been trying to talk about this enough, and we actually quoted in the Washington Post on the front page the day before yesterday. And hopefully the justices will be maybe even ashamed of their outrageous ideas and not kill a wealth tax.
Are justices ashamed? Really? The guy who's basically on Harlan Crow's payroll, where you think he's going to be ashamed?
Maybe a few of them. They did vote to subpoena Harlan Crow today. But we need more people like Elizabeth Warren.
Yes.
Her protege Katie Porter is running for Senate in California. I've been supporting her. Elizabeth Warren is just so special. I was in the Senate Finance Committee testifying. I'm sure I told you about this a week or two ago.
Right.
And just 2 hours after the hearing started, this door opened and Elizabeth Warren walked the door. You could just see everybody just sort of start and look up and, sit straighter, and just seeing her walk across the room just energized people a little bit. And that's the energy we need. Somebody who will actually stand there and say that we should tax these wealthy people who don't pay any taxes because they don't have any income. They're just billionaires.
No, you're right. She is
a billionaire.
She's a rock star. I've had the opportunity to meet her on a number of occasions, and you're right, when she comes into a room, everyone's drawn to her. But that's not how we shouldn't be depending on that. What we should be doing is we should be drawn to this issue, and we should be demanding, Elizabeth Warren and others to be doing this, not waiting for them to lead us to the promised land. This is something that we should be fighting for.
Yeah, we need not a few rock stars. We need people calling their congresspeople and telling them to not stop putting up with this bullshit about trickle down and make the rich people pay taxes. And if everybody starts calling their congresspeople and tell them that we are not going to vote for people who are against taxing the rich, it'll happen.
So I'm sure you had a very long hour in talking with folks. What are you telling them is the solution? Look, everyone knows the problem. Everyone knows that, at least I think everyone knows, that we have a wealth class that we have created through our sacrifice and our struggle. what's the marching orders then? What do you say is the direction forward? It's easy to point out the problem. It's easy to be the guy pointing the finger. It's a lot harder to be the guy coming along with the shovel to pick up the you know what on the other end.
I'll tell you what part of the problem is: the fact that the rich people, the Republicans, have convinced so many people that they have more in common with the billionaires than with their neighbors. Everyone is afraid that, oh, I'm going to be a billionaire someday, so we better not tax billionaires. I'll have to pay that.
I don't even know that it's even just billionaires, Morris. I think I've got guys I work with who still believe that they're gonna, when they die, they're gonna be taxed. I believe the right-wing message machine has been so powerful. I believe the talk radio has been so powerful that we've tried to compete in. And I think that people have been fed a whole line of you know what, and they've bought it because there was nobody telling them that, no, you're not, you make it $50,000 a year, you're not going to pay an estate tax unless you've got an estate over $20 million, or what is it, $11 million?
Yeah, $11 million per person right now.
Yeah, I mean, unless you got $11 million stuffed under the mattress, you're not paying an estate tax if you're making $50,000 a year.
Yeah, it's just, they're afraid. They believe that what's happening to the rich people is happening. Even when I was in the Senate, I started talking about bills to tax people who are billionaires. And they said, oh, but rich people pay all the taxes now. Well, yeah. If you define rich as meaning more than the median income, yeah, they do pay all the taxes now.
But the response to that, Morris, is they have all the money.
They do. But yeah, the difference is the Republicans try to say, oh, they try to tell half the country you are the rich people that the Democrats are going after. When really we're talking about even a fraction of 1% of the people are the ones that we think should pay more taxes. And that's the problem. The Republicans have convinced almost everybody in the country that they're rich because they're a little bit richer than some neighbor they have. And they say, oh, the Democrats are trying to tax you because you have a tiny bit more money than your neighbor. And that's what we're fighting against, is this idea that everyone thinks they're rich because the Republicans have told them, you are the rich people and you should be happy.
Well, I got to tell you, I give you guys credit for going out and getting your hands dirty, getting out into the neighborhoods and talking with people and doing the hard work of organizing. I'm hoping it bears fruit, and I'm hoping that we in the working class wake up to the reality that we have been getting screwed for a very long time. But Morris, as always, I appreciate the time. Great having you.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks so much. Our good friend Morris Pearl, he's the chairman of the Patriotic Millionaires. Make sure you check out their website, patrioticmillionaires.org. We'll get links out on social media. You can take a look at that. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I got to tell you, I think the work that they do is really important over at the Patriotic Millionaires. Pointing out the fact that the tax code is rigged. I mean, look, Warren Buffett said, look, it's class warfare and my class is winning, but we shouldn't be. They have all the money, but we've outprocreated them. How is it that they got us to vote for them to get tax breaks? I'm still trying to figure that trick out. Still trying to figure it out. I know. Someday, when I'm tinkering in my garage, I'm going to be the next gazillionaire. And look, I would love to pay 95%, tax like they did back in the old days, because it would mean I had Lots of money. Let's go to the phones. We got Jack from Wisconsin on line 1. Jack, how are you today?
Oh, just peachy keen. You, I got this call an observation.
Hit me.
Something. Sold on this. I trickle down idea. Believe that they're going to end up in the top 1%. There's something wrong with that numbering system.
Yeah. Yeah. Not all of us can be in the top 1%. You're right.
Well, and you know, when 15 or 20% are figuring they're going to be in the top 1%, like I say, the math just doesn't quite work.
Yeah, somebody's disappointed.
You think? The other half of this is the hypocrisy that, or irony, I guess I'd call it, that the folks that do vote for people that give trillions away to billionaires, they're first of all, you know, told, well, you're a little bit richer than the next guy, so you're among the rich people that if we tax the really rich people, you're going to get taxed, and yet they're told, oh, but you got it. The economy is just so shaky, and the immigrants the illegals are coming in to take your job. What's wrong with that picture?
It's all about the fear. It's all about the fear, Jack. And you know that as well as anyone. As long as they can, we're going to take your stuff, and it's going to be them going to do it. You'll be pliable.
Yeah, it's the old us versus them, and yeah, if it isn't the illegals, then it's the Hispanics that are citizens, or it's the gays, or it's the old divide and conquer Scott Walker trick. Actually, if you go back that far,
it goes back even further. It goes back to the Jay Gould. I can pay half the working class to murder the other half.
Oh yeah, yep, I remember that quote too. And I'm not an economist.
I appreciate the thoughts, Jack. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
No, look, at the end of the day, Jack's right. I mean, we're not all going to get into the 1%. The math just, that's a simple way to put it. The math just doesn't add up. It sounds like a Yogi Berra-ism. Where's Yogi when we need him? No, but, and look, I've talked to people who truly believe, someday I'm going to make all this money, and I'm not going to, I don't want to pay taxes. And look, nobody really wants to pay taxes. It's it's the price of admission. And the folks who have this almost immeasurable wealth in some cases, they use the system a lot more than the rest of us, and don't want to pay for that either. They made their money off the backs of investments from past generations. They made their money off the backs of working people making sacrifices. And I think we had better figure that out quickly, because we didn't really get into it with Representative Takano, but this idea that the new technologies are coming online, the person who figures out how to harness that technology and then eliminate millions of jobs, they're going to be the next gazillionaire. As Representative Takano said, look, they believe the country's first trillionaire has already been born. It's just a matter of how much sacrifice from working people will it take to get that person to $1 trillion. And it's every so often someone sends me the cartoon of an empty plate of cookies, or there's one cookie on the plate, and the rich guy who's got the other 9 cookies in his hands, going, hey, that guy over there is going to take your cookie, when he's walking away with 9/10 of it. Now you go back to my grandparents' generation, and this is where earlier William had talked about we had an economy that was somewhat balanced. You had pretty broad shared prosperity, not for absolutely everyone, and you have to identify that minorities were really kept out of a lot of it. But as a country, you had a large middle class. You had a prosperous working class. And you didn't have gazillionaires because you had a 92% top marginal tax rate. which meant, and if I remember the math, if the numbers come back to me, which in today's dollars, if you were making more than $1.6 million back then, that dollar over 1.6 million was taxed at 92%. And what that did is it discouraged people from paying CEOs or themselves all that money. They simply used their profits in different ways. They built hospitals, they built schools, they built auditoriums, they dedicated things to themselves. They put their names all over everything, which is fine. You know, Carnegie built libraries all over the place to give himself a legacy of not being a complete and total a-hole. But they did a lot of that stuff to avoid paying taxes because they believed that they could use the money better than our government could. And we can argue over whether that's true or not. But the money was still used in our society. It still made the lives of we the people better because the resources, the wealth that our labor was creating was being put back into the business, into the community, into health, education, whatever. Not saddling our generations, future generations with massive, structural debt, student loan debt, you name it, debt. We had a more equal economy because we had a tax code that made sense. And it goes back to I likened it back to the days in the cave. The bigger your shoulders, the stronger you are, the more water you carried back to the cave. That's simple. From what much is given, much is expected. I don't think that's hard to understand. But, again, having gone through greed is good, hooray for me, the one who dies with the most toys, that nonsense of the 80s, that's internalized. So you get rich people who think that they're better than everyone else and entitled to more. And the numbers don't matter. The amount of money doesn't matter. It's like I said earlier, it's what the money says. I'm special. I'm important. I'm smart. And I look at Elon Musk, one of the richest men in the world. I don't know if you've been paying attention to Elon lately. Got to be questioning the smart part. Knows what to get involved in, knows what businesses to get behind. But when he opens his mouth, kind of got to wonder. But I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I do answer all emails personally. I got to get to this because this just blew my mind. On the greed front, American Public Education. Yes, this is a corporation. It's called American Public Education Incorporated. Their board has authorized $8 million in stock buybacks. Now, this is in addition to the $8 million that they did earlier in the year in stock. They call it repurchases, stock buybacks. What I found interesting is American Public Education Incorporated. Do you think it's actually public education? According to Wikipedia, American Public University Systems, which is the big part of American Public Education Incorporated, is a private, for-profit online university system. Nothing public about it unless you count all the GI Bill money that's gone into their pockets. Now, their goal is they're the leading education services provider that offers respective, innovative, and affordable educational programs and services through its wholly owned subsidiary, American Public University Systems, which encompasses the American Public University, which is not public, the American Military University, which is not the military, Honduras College of Nursing, and Rasmussen University, and a graduate school, all of which private. But hey, this is the American Public Education Incorporated. Doesn't that make you crazy? We could be using that money instead of buying back stocks to make that cheaper.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1854. That was the day that Mary McDowell, known as the Angel of the Chicago Stockyards, was born. Mary's father brought the family to Chicago from Cincinnati after the Civil War. Her family was friends with U.S. President Rutherford B. Hayes, and as a young woman, she spent a month in the White House as a guest. Mary received her college degree and worked as a teacher for a wealthy family in New York. But living and working among the wealthy was not to be the course of her life. She returned to Chicago and became a kindergarten teacher at the famed Hull House. She then became the head of the University of Chicago Settlement House in the back of the yards. The Settlement House served the diverse neighborhoods around the Chicago stockyards. The community center included a library, play lots, gymnasiums, and classrooms. Mary and her settlement house supported the rights of workers to form unions and to have safe working conditions. In 1903, Mary became the head of the Illinois chapter of the National Women's Trade Union League. The Pittsburgh Press reported on an incident that captured the spirit of Mary McDowell. The city of Chicago had a practice of using garbage to fill holes in the streets surrounding the stockyards. Mary showed up at the mayor's office with a group of women from the neighborhood and demanded, quote, "All right, we want the rest of it dumped on Lakeshore Drive. If it's good enough for the stockyards, it's good enough for the drive too." As a result, the city stopped using garbage to repair the streets. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Growing up, I absorbed a lot of values from my old Texas daddy. A strong commitment to the common good, a healthy work ethic, and a lively sense of humor. But one thing about him I've rejected: his determination to have a perfect yard of thick, verdant St. Augustine grass. Lord, how he worked at it, laying sod, watering, fertilizing, watering, weeding, watering, spreading pesticides, watering, mowing, more watering. But it was too hot, too dry, too infested with blight, bugs, slugs, and such. He was up against Texas nature, and he just couldn't win. So I've gone in the opposite direction, slowly nurturing a natural yard of native trees, drought-tolerant plants, and a general live-with-nature ethic in my little landscape. I'm hardly alone in this rejection of the uniform green grass imperative. A spontaneous yard rebellion is taking hold across our country as more and more households, neighborhoods, businesses, etc. shift to a nature-friendly approach. A particularly encouraging push for change is coming from school kids, elementary level through college, who are appalled by the poisoning of our globe and organizing locally to do something that both makes a difference and makes a statement. One exemplary channel for their activism is a student movement called Rewild Your Campus. Of course, some people consider wild yards to be scruffy, ugly, unruly. That's their choice, but some also insist that tidy grass lawns must be everyone's choice. So they proclaim themselves to be the yard police, demanding that cities and homeowner associations make green grass uniformity the law. They file busybody lawsuits and run right-wing social media campaigns targeting people and groups that disobey. This is Jim Hightower saying, these attacks are silly because they are silly, and also because they're attacking the future. To work for yard sanity and choice, go to rewild.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I gotta tell you, I'm still stuck on the Hunter Biden thing. The fact that Hunter Biden jammed it right up James Comer's well. And look, I'm right with Hunter Biden. You want me to testify? You want to hear from me in public where everyone's watching, and you can't then go outside the closed doors and make stuff up. You can't lie. And I think that's what really got Comer all upset. And here to share some thoughts on will Comer get over it, or is he still a little chafe? That's why I've asked our good friend Sarah Burris to come talk with us. She's a reporter over at Raw Story, rawstory.com, the website. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Hello, how are you?
I am good. So what do you make of this? Do you find it as funny as I do that Hunter Biden has been silent kind of all this time and then finally just go, fine, you want me to testify in public?
Right up the Comer on that one. So the thing that I love, and we found out in some of the documents that the letter that Hunter Biden's lawyer sent out in response to Comer, and apparently he's offered to testify twice before. So it isn't even just that. Like, he's already said twice to Comer, look, I'll come in, I'll talk to you, whatever you want. And even like a couple of weeks ago, Comer was talking about, yeah, come into the hearing room. We'll testify beside each other. You can ask me questions. I'll ask you questions. And he seems totally open to this idea of having a hearing in public. And then all of a sudden, when Hunter Biden was like, yeah, but I'm doing this in public. And they were just like, oh, no, we can't have that. And even like some of the Republicans that were on the oversight committee kind of freaked out a little bit because they had said, yes, Hunter Biden's going to come. He's going to tell the public what's going on. And then they found out, oh, crap, it's actually behind closed doors. And then they had to delete a bunch of tweets. And that whole day was just watching them fall all over themselves, trying to come up with some reason.
Yeah, what was interesting to me, and you watch a lot more media than I do because that's your gig. But it was interesting to me watching Fox News and others kind of trip over themselves on why it should be behind closed doors. And this is where you go. The news media wants something outside of their purview. They want something to happen that they can't see. When has that ever happened? And who wrote that script?
I mean, they really were falling all over themselves trying to figure something out, because they desperately wanted to like give the benefit of the doubt to Comer and figure out some way to attack Hunter Biden. But after saying so many times, like, he needs to come forward, he needs to speak out, and finally he called their bluff and was like, yeah, no, we have to do it publicly. And I love it. I think it's the most hilarious thing. And the whole day was just a complete cluster. And, you know, he got Comered.
He got. We're now turning him into we're going to turn him into a verb. All right, you know. I'm not going to say what I was thinking, but let's move. Let us move to the next thing. What happened to Marjorie Taylor Greene's resolution to impeach Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas? I thought this was a done deal. I thought this was her rally cry. What happened?
You know, I'm not really clear on what exactly happened, other than I think she supported the wrong speaker candidate.
Oops.
Right? Like, it seems like her relationship with Kevin McCarthy was such that she was cozying up to him, like trying to figure out how she could become more powerful. And then all of a sudden he was out, and she didn't have the right horse in that race. And she has no relationship with Kevin, with MAGA Mike Johnson. And I think this idea of forcing a lot of the members into voting on these sort of performative BS actions, you know, there are 18 Republicans that are in Democratic seats, and they're just like, guys, like, we haven't passed any legitimate legislation all year. We got to come up with something.
Yeah.
And so I think Johnson was just like, yeah, okay, we'll have a vote on it. But Tim Emmer, is the one who's kind of like shutting that down. And so I think they're going to end up having a vote in committee, but it's never going to go to the floor, to the whole floor.
Yeah, I mean, I look at her and I'm going, you know, she definitely picked the wrong horse because clearly her guy is now out. And Johnson is a religious zealot, which, you know, I gotta be honest, my view of him is, you know, looking at her going, no, you belong in the kitchen. And that's, I just don't see them meshing.
I definitely not. And I mean, I think too, Marge is having a rough time anyway, because, you know, she published this book and it has just completely flopped. And so she kind of already looks like an embarrassment publicly because of that. And so now there's this thing, and she, you know, has no real position in leadership anymore, and I mean, she's just kind of screwed. And not in a good way.
Yeah. Not going there either. Just not doing it. let's get into the soap operas. As the George Santos turns, these are the days of our lives. No, wait, that's the wrong soap opera. Evidently, Matt Gaetz came to his maybe his defense. Thoughts on the as the Santos turns?
So here's the thing. It's really hard for me because when you have to deal with the news all week, like there are very few pleasures that I have in this day today of my job. And George Santos is really it. Like I just love the complete cluster and foolishness of this man. And because I think it's hilarious. I know it's terrible for government. I know this is a really, really bad thing, but it's so funny. And it brings me so much joy. So kind of what happened today is he did this big press conference and just ended up looking like the biggest weirdo in the world. And then he started talking to a bunch of other press people throughout the day. So they were asking him all kinds of questions. When it finally came time for them to do the vote, he has Clay Higgins from Louisiana and Matt Gaetz from Florida. I don't know about the Clay Higgins part, but the Gaetz thing, like you have to understand, Gaetz still has an investigation going on in the ethics committee about him.
Yep.
The DOJ has said we're not going to prosecute him for sex trafficking, but they didn't say they weren't not gonna prosecute. They basically were just like we're gonna let this go for a bit, right? Unless something crazy happens and we can find some other witness who's willing to come forward and speak out in court and who's not already in prison. But ethics, is still doing a really extensive investigation. They've been doing it for a couple of years now, right? Like this has been going on for a while.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if it's actually happening. It's taken that long.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. But the thing is that you kind of have to have that rule of unless somebody's convicted, we shouldn't expel them because it would apply to a whole heck of a lot of people.
Yeah, no,
and
look.
I mean, definitely, and that's sort of what Gaetz said, but he is definitely one of them. Like, if they could expel anybody, it would be Matt Gaetz. They all hate him so much. He's like the Ted Cruz of Congress.
Another one with the most punchable face in Congress. But here's the thing, and I said this from the beginning, Democrats should not vote to expel him. That's a Republican problem. They should have to deal with their own problems. Stop bailing them out.
Absolutely. I'm of two minds. Like, yes, I enjoy the entertainment, but I do kind of feel like unless he's been convicted,
nope.
Yeah, no,
that's
a really hard argument to make where it's like, yeah, if you end up being innocent, but you've been thrown out of Congress, that kind of makes Congress look petty and immature, which they are. But, they try not to look like that in, public.
Well, there is that. But, the thing is what I love about, a lot of this stuff, especially around Santos is, all of the things that he's accused of, that, I love the projection because, they tried to make Hunter Biden out to be this big grifter. And look, maybe he is. Maybe he is, the nepotism poster child. But they can't find anything on Biden, on Joe Biden, because there's nothing. But I find it interesting that, Comer's got some interesting financial dealings. You now see this story with, Andy Ogles, who's got some Oogles or whatever his name, Googles. He's got some interesting, kind of money. It's for me, I want to see more of this following the money where these Republicans, where are they getting it? And they were talking big money. Where did George Santos get such a huge amount of money? The guy doesn't look like he could put two nickels together, let alone raise enough money to run a congressional campaign.
And that is a pretty substantial question for not just him, but like you said, Andy Ogles or whatever, the congressman from Tennessee, who I think loaned something like $320,000 to his campaign, and whenever they asked, started looking at financial disclosure reports, the guy didn't have a checking account or a savings account, and so everybody's like, where did this money come from, bro?
He saved quarters. He saved his change.
Maybe. Except I'm pretty sure that, like, my grandpa had a closet full of jars, lots of coffee cans of change, and even at his peak collection stage, it still was like not over a couple grand.
Yeah,
And
no,
that
I got a big
Right.
giant piggy bank back here. It's a big square, says Union Yes on it. It's one of the glass blocks that someone made into a piggy bank. It's full. It's probably got about $350 in it. Not 320,000. I wish it did. I wish I could find that magic piggy bank.
And that's sort of what happened with Santos too, where the dude was like, I think he ended up loaning his campaign as much as like $700,000. Part of it, like the first, I think 500,000 was all a lie. He basically reported it on his campaign finance reports and then sort of waited a bit and then pulled in a bunch of money from somebody else that he'd then sort of loaned to the campaign on the DL several months after the fact. Like the whole thing looks so shady and funnily. And we've had that conversation about the OnlyFans thing where I'm just like, $50,000 like seems like a cap, right? Like $50,000 seems like a salary that somebody has. Like why do you stop? That's where you stop, right? So I think he's funneling it to somebody, and I mean that's part of the DOJ investigation. I think the DOJ is going to come back and be like, he gave 50 grand to his husband or somebody.
Well, that does sound plausible. I mean, because he looks like a guy who would pay. That's not nice of me.
I know.
No, he
But
does.
you know
He
what's
does look like a
funny?
guy who would pay to see somebody on OnlyFans.
He said today he didn't know what OnlyFans was,
Uh-huh.
that somebody had to tell him once he entered Congress. And don't you know that poor staffer? Like, just imagine that, like, 23-year-old who's just like, Mom, today I had to tell a congressman what OnlyFans was. Right? Like, that's your day, right? Except I'm pretty sure he knew what it was, and I'm pretty sure he was funneling money through it.
I'm pretty. Look, maybe he raised the $500,000 on OnlyFans. Maybe he's one of the top models. Who knows?
Maybe. I will say, from all that Botox, he's got the smoothest forehead in Congress.
Ouch. I'm not even going to touch that one. Not going to touch it. Not going to do it. You're not going to drag me into the gutter. I'm not going to allow it. First OnlyFans and now his forehead. It's not right.
A lot of Botox, man.
It's a lot of Botox. You listen to the Rick Smith Show here with Sarah Burris. Sarah's a reporter at Raw Story, rawstory.com, the website. Your buddy Michael Cohen, am I getting this argument right? He's saying that his probation should end because he thinks Trump's going to win re-election, and well, he's screwed like the rest of us. Is that the argument?
Well, his argument is that he's been cooperating with prosecutors for the last 2 years, and up until I think this year, that has mostly been behind closed doors, right? Like he's been cooperating with the Attorney General and with the Alvin Bragg in Manhattan. I'm sure he's doing some with Special Counsel Jack Smith as well. But the thing is you saw the dude testify for 2 days, or like 11 hours or something like that. And so he consistently has been going to the judge and saying, look, like I'm doing everything that you want me to. I've got all the points from the whatever, act thing for prisoners, and I've done everything. And I'm cooperating with everyone. At the very least, like cut down my probation a little bit.
Yeah, or at least make a caveat that if Trump's elected, that I'm done before he takes office.
Right. Well, I mean, the good news is I think the cap is November of 24. So even if Trump wins, it'll be January before he's inaugurated, and Cohen will be safe.
Okay.
But the thing is he's basically like, look, I've done 2 of the 3 years, and you're not applying any of the points that I've gotten from the the Recidivism Act, whatever the thing was that Trump signed in 2018 that lets you get days off of your sentence. He's been like hardcore on that thing. He's kept, a decent job. He's doing the thing, and I get it. Like if it was somebody else, they'd be like, good on you, good for you, go ahead. You've done 2 of the 3 years. Rock on with your bad self. But it's sad because it's like the dude has dealt with enough, and again, like he's basically the one who was left holding the bag for Donald Trump's hush money.
Yeah.
And so it's like, man, let the guy have his life,
Yeah, but then there's a part of me. Now, look, I get what you're saying. There's a part of me that goes, he was Donald Trump's fixer. Do you know how many people he's strong-armed and he stuck it to it? This is like karma coming back and biting him in the behind. That
it's true.
Yeah, I mean, I get that, but look, I also sympathize. You know, because I think he is trying to make amends and do the right thing. I think he's trying to get back somewhere near the straight and narrow. But I don't know. There's still part of me goes, I don't know.
I know. You have to figure out, like, where is that line? Like, what needs to be done before I'm satisfied with this, idea that he's no longer in the cult and he's done whatever he can do, to earn back the trust of the world. And, I mean, the books that he's published and the stuff that he's come out about, and, the fact that he's constantly dealing with threats and intimidation, and his family.
No, I get it. Look, it's the reason that Joe Walsh and I are friendly. When Joe Walsh was in Congress, if you would have told me back during the Tea Party years that Joe Walsh and I would be friendly,
right? For real.
Come on. Not just smoking. What are you mainlining?
Yeah, and I mean, I know that there's this idea of the enemy of my friend. But the thing is that a lot of these people who were our perceived enemies have turned into people who are still fighting for the right thing, regardless of whether or not we agree on stuff.
Right.
Like Cheney's book is going to come out on Tuesday at midnight, because I'm going to be awake at Tuesday at midnight, like downloading the thing and having to read it by 6 a.m. And I think, looking at people like her and other folks who have been willing to take the bullet, essentially.
Yeah.
And
she's still a Cheney, though. I struggle with that too.
I know, right? Like, how much of the sins of the father, right? and especially the gay thing with her for a long time. It's like, come on, your sister was a lesbian.
Yeah,
like,
no.
Why be anti-LGBT for as long as she was?
I'm right there with you. Finally, I got to get your thoughts on the revelations of my congressman, Scott Pardon Me Perry. Some interesting texts coming out that, well, I had some people say, well, he's a sitting congressman, not accused of anything, so they shouldn't be. No, the guy was clearly part of what could have been treason.
Definitely. So he's doing all this coordination with Jeffrey Clark, who they were trying to get him to take over the Justice Department and essentially declare the election null and void and pass it all back to the state legislatures so that the state legislatures could overthrow the election. Like, Scott Perry was in the middle of this. And he was directly texting with Donald Trump, with Mark Meadows. I mean, not Donald Trump, but he was dictating text messages that were going to Donald Trump. And so this has been a big connection that I know the January 6th committee wanted to track down. But Scott Perry was like, yeah, I'm not going to comply with your subpoena. It was the same thing that Jim Jordan did. What was so interesting is that when Steve Bannon and Mark Meadows did the same thing, they're like, yeah, we're at what's his name? Peter, whatever, the anger ball. But all of them, who are unwilling to comply with the subpoena were held in contempt. Steve Bannon's going to have to do 4 months in the clink.
Yeah.
But people like Scott Perry, they let him off. The DOJ hasn't.
Scott Pardon Me Perry. One of the things that caught my attention is, Clark evidently, according to what's been reported in Politico, Clark reportedly said to, as they were going through, his Bing appointment, he says, I'm praying, this makes me quite nervous, and wonder if I'm worthy or ready. And Scott Pardon Me Perry, my congressman, replied, you are the man, I have confirmed it. God does what he does for a reason. And I'm going, why would you pull God into this? Why?
It's so gross. That is like the grossest thing. I hate it when people do that. But that's how you're really in a cult, is when you start using God to justify your own bad behavior.
There it is. Sarah, great stuff as always. Appreciate the time.
Have an awesome week.
You as well, our good friend Sarah Burris. Make sure you check out her work, rawstory.com, the website. Quick break, right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1909. That was the day the British House of Lords rejected the People's Budget. The proposed budget plan was a product of the Liberal government headed by Prime Minister H.H. Asquith. This budget was championed by the Chancellor of Exchequer, David Lloyd George, and the President of the Board of Trade, a young Winston Churchill. The goal of the budget was to shift more of the tax burden to the wealthy. Lloyd George introduced the budget to Parliament. He praised the budget, declaring, "This is a war budget. It is for raising money to wage implacable warfare against poverty and squalidness." The budget included tax increases for higher incomes to fund welfare reforms. The budget also called for a rise in the inheritance tax. These increases were relatively modest. The most controversial aspect of the people's budget was a hike on taxes on land sales. This would have had an impact on large landowners. Since many conservatives were large landowners, they opposed the budget. The House of Lords was allowed to reject the budget, but could not amend a money bill. They had not rejected a budget for more than 2 centuries. King Edward VII privately urged that the budget be passed to avoid a crisis. The public clamored for the passage of the budget plan, but the House of Lords vetoed it. The House of Lords eventually capitulated and passed the budget the following April. Resistance to a progressive income tax structure and raising the tax rates on the wealthy is not unique to the British Parliament. Similar tax proposals have been offered in the United States and have been met with stiff opposition from conservatives in our Congress. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Remember, check out the website, bookmark it. Never forget the website. Did you ever see that South Park video with Planetarium? Or when Mr. Garrison leaves the room, then the brainwashing begins. That's what I want you to think of when anytime. TheRickSmithShow.com. That's what you do. Grab the podcast wherever you find your podcasts. Get ours, and they will be there. You get to hear people like Sarah and more. Now, here's some fun and entertainment. The Republican folks in the National Committee, they are trying to consider how they can, shake up the debates a little bit. Maybe because they've found out what a flop it has been thus far. And my mind started going into weird places because they got to pull people in who don't qualify because of their weird things. So I thought, like a TV telethon, maybe a lottery, just pull people out of the crowd as you're walking into the debate. Maybe having like a number under a seat, whatever. Go just grab random people and have them run for Republican, nominee, because none of them are going to get it. And look, you might pull some schmo, you might pull me off the street and go, hey, run for Republican presidential nomination. And I would probably do better than those idiots are doing. But still not have a chance against Trump, because here's the thing. Trump's going to be the nominee. Even if he is convicted, because guess what? The RNC rules don't address anything with a nominee convicted of a crime, even a felony. So they're stuck with him. And I don't care all the shaking up in the world, not going to make those debates any better. Sorry, no celebrity debate or no apprenticeship debate or any of that. You're stuck with Trump. You wanted it, you got it. Anyway, if you missed any portion of the program, podcast. If I said something that got under your nerves, under your skin, I want to hear it. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.